Hello, listeners. This is Andy Greatrex, and welcome to the Orange Frog Fly By Night podcast, where we bring a little bit more joy, positivity, and happiness to people around the world. With me today is my co-host, Kim Tufnell, all the way from Michigan. Kim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andy. How are you?
I am awesome. So, Kim, why don't you give the listeners a little bit about your background so that we know where you come from in the positive psychology field?
Well, I started my career in education, specifically special education. I was a teacher. I love working with students with disabilities and helping them find some positivity in their day, even when those wins are just small and little. We like to celebrate those. I went on to be a middle school principal and then a school superintendent. And then I came on with ITLN with Orange Frog in 2018 and have really hit my passion with this, and just bringing positivity to schools and organizations around the world has really filled my bucket for me. How about you, Andy? How did you get started in this?
Well, I initially started in the healthcare industry in Australia and working on culture and how when a patient presents in their family on possibly the worst day of their life, how we could make that just more compassionate and a bit more positive and a bit more comfortable. And even though we as staff members in the hospital had seen this hundreds of times, this was the first time that some of these patients saw that. So I worked in the in the hospital system, and then set up the Society of Organizational Learning for Australia, and then started touring with international thought leaders, which is when I joined with International Thought Leader Network and Sean Acor over 10 years ago. And so it's been a great journey. And I know that you're excited as me to introduce our guest speaker today, because he's been a pioneer in the field of positive psychology. And this might be a great time to introduce Eric Kapinski.
Yeah, so Eric has been a key member of Sean Acres Good Thinking International Thought Leader Network since 2012 as a keynote speaker and a master trainer with Sean's Happiness Advantage Orange Frog corporate training. He developed and implemented Orange Frog in-house certification program and has trained over 100 facilitators to lead the Orange Frog in their organization. And I know I love working with Eric as well. So welcome, Eric. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thanks so much. Great to see you guys.
Awesome. Hey, so Eric, like to start this. What are a couple of positive things that have happened in your world this week?
Let's see. A few things that I love. I've been training for Spartan races. Like, these are the obstacle course races that are really fun. You get out there, and for me, it's been motivation to get into the gym and actually do more workouts than just cardio, which was my history. I think going with that is I listen to a lot of high energy electric dance music, EDM. And anytime I'm in the car, anytime I'm by myself, because my family gets tired of listening to it all the time, but I never do. And it's a really energizing set of music for me. And then let's see, one other, just to sort of counter all the go things. I also really enjoy a good meditation and trying to actually take little breaks out of my day to just focus on my breath and let everything calm down a little bit. since everything else is about moving things forward, it's nice to have a little break. And that's a really, all three of those are really things that make me happy and really help me, bring me energy, but in very different ways.
Oh, that's awesome. Kim, I don't know whether you know this, but kind of every August, September, you'll find Eric at Burning Man. I think that's how many years have you been doing that for, Eric?
That's been since 2000. So every year I take a little trip out to the Black Rock Desert.
Well, I kind of had to chuckle to myself when you talked about having all that crazy energetic music playing when you're driving and stuff in the car. And I like to have it playing too. And then when I get into a lot of traffic, it's like I got to turn it down, because if I can't, if I got to be able to see. And for some reason, turning down the music helps me see better. I don't know. How crazy is that?
Awesome.
So Eric, like, what makes you happy? Like, what practices or happy habits cultivate happiness in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think they connect with sort of what was happy this week, and that fitness is my number one, like getting out and exercising. It's always been a part of my life. I was a track and cross country runner. I did triathlons as a young adult. Now I really like the Spartan races, kind of subbing in for that because I just love getting out and running and feeling those endorphins hit and staying fit. And so that's certainly a huge one. And something that's a habit that has become such a central part of my life because it feels good. And I know it's good for me, right? So you get all this stuff, but it's really hard to motivate based on, some feel good thing in the future. But it's really nice that it feels good to me to go for a run. I teach a spin class as well at the Y here, and that's really great energy and great fun. Plus, I get to play some EDM for them and some favorites that get people sort of motivated to exercise. So exercise is certainly big. And then I talked about meditation before, and that's an important way to reset all the go kind of energy. And so that's a habit that I do pretty regularly as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Good.
So can you talk about, like, maybe there's an example of a challenging situation, maybe that you implemented some positive psychology habits or some tactics, and then the outcome turned out, the result was much better that way?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess one of my big personal stories is I used to work in the life science industry. I was a biotech executive and found this positive psychology things, this research, and was like, how come no one's talking about this? This is 15 years ago. How come no one's talking about this? This is really cool. And I decided that I would switch my career because it wasn't as rewarding doing what I was doing and switch into this. Well, that was great for so many things, right? I get to dig deep into the positive psychology research. I get to dig deep and start to apply these things in my own life. But where it didn't do is I was now a solo entrepreneur. Like I left my teams in the business world that I was in order to bring these tools to other organizations. Well, I'm working when I'm on the road and I'm working with a team, awesome. I'm deep into people, but I'm an extrovert. And so for me, and social connection is so important for all of us, no matter whether extroverted or introverted, different styles for different people. But for me to suddenly be working at home when I wasn't on a client site was rough. And I was reading all this research about how our social connection, our feeling of belonging is our number one driver of happiness. And yet here I was working by myself at home, right? My wife was working at an office at the time. My kids were at school and I'm trying to do stuff. So I made it really clear that whenever I had a week at home, I would be scheduling lunches and happy hour meetings and coffee meetings throughout my week because I needed people. We all need people. We're a tribal species. It's so central to our emotional well-being. And so for me, it was working alone had to be a big adjustment because I realized how much when I'm by myself, I can cycle into those negative spirals. But when I have someone to share with, someone to get ideas from, someone who's facing similar challenges that I am, it really helps me feel like I can keep going. It helps me stay engaged in the material that I'm doing. So that's a real personal story from how I took these tools and really moved them into my own world.
So if I think of somebody who's listening right now and they're like, okay, I am that introverted person, I am okay being like this. How could you recommend reaching out? I mean, what are some things that you would recommend for this introverted person, like to stay connected? Because it's really easy for us just to hunker in and it's like, I'm okay by myself.
Yeah.
And yet we know, right, the key to long-term happiness are social connections. So what are some key ideas that you could tell somebody who is introverted?
So I think so for anybody, we all need people. And for extroverts, it might be a lot of variety of people. And you might, so it was really easy for me. I knew lots of people that easily free to schedule lunches and coffees and things. And I'm a natural in those environments. I love it. If you're more introverted though, it's important that you still find those people that get you, find those people you feel connected somehow to. And 3 or 4 people is all we need really to have that sense of belonging, to have that sense of connection, to have that social connection that allows us to certainly not have loneliness be the block, right? And so same things, but do them in your way. maybe go on a walk with someone. Sometimes people will feel a lot better walking where they're not looking face to face, right? Have some of your meetings where you're walking, either walking around the office or going outside for a walk if the weather's nice. Like you can have people you really know well, have them for lunch, right? Making sure you're using those chunks of time, particularly meal times, where you take a break from your crazy work and you find some group, or maybe it's one-on-one, or maybe it's a small group. Some people feel better when it's not just the intensity of a one-on-one interaction, and they make sure you've got a lunch group that you do once or twice a week. None of these things is about all the time, right? When we're talking about happiness at work and at home, we're not talking about having to feel like the peak of your positive joy all the time. We're just talking about having a few moments in your day, whether they're social moments or whether they're just a shared positive things, sharing some gratitude, feeling that those connections, etc. Or none of these things, when we talk about them in workshops and things, are about, hey, you got to constantly be doing more happiness stuff. No. Right. But it's nice to have them 3 or 4 times a day, where you start a meeting with something cool, where you do your exercise in the morning, or you have a meditation practice, whatever it is. Finding those few minutes and just doing them consistently is the most important thing.
Well, and I appreciate that you said that, because I think that sometimes a misnomer of happiness, we're going to bring it into work, or I need to have it in my life, is that I do need to be up here all the time, right? I'm going to be showing it all the time. So I really appreciate you bringing that in. It's like, it's not about being there all the time. It's finding those peak moments.
Yeah. So peak moments, and the peak moments don't have to be high energy moments either.
Right.
You can just be like, oh, wow, this person gets me. And like just that sense of belonging that comes with that, or a piece of, hey, that was a really meaningful thing. Look at the value I brought to this client, or look at how people were helped by what work I just did, or what work our team just did. Like those little moments, just noticing them is the most important part, and then letting them soak in a little bit, and then you go on to your day. Look, we are all so busy. The demands of the modern day workplace are so high. We can't spend hours doing happiness exercises, right? But we all have 2 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to just pop around a quick gratitude share, or a quick get to know you question, like what was your first job, or what was your favorite album in high school, or what was what's your non-work related superpower, and just go around the circle, get to know your people, talk about.
And I've worked with people who have said they're actually putting it on their calendar now, just actually scheduling that out, so that a timer will go off. They'll get up and go talk to somebody. 2 minutes. Just create that space. Yeah.
Exactly. And then doing it when you hear that.
Yes. Exactly.
Hey, Eric, I wanted to circle back a little bit. I've known you for a while. Okay. And as you know, I had a great childhood. I grew up in Australia. It was all beaches and surf and, fun in the sun. But I know you grew up in a military family, right? And so you traveled around a lot. And so no one ever sat me down and said, hey, this is how to be happy, right? I never got that kind of positive psychology. Definitely wasn't in the schools. Yep. So can you talk a little bit about, your early growing up, but then how you actually found positive psychology? Because I think it's a relatively new science, right?
Right.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And then I guess some examples of how you've used positive psychology in your personal life with that background.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the quick story is, growing up, moving different places, always, it pushes everybody. Military families, kids are either, if they're already starting introvert, they go more introvert and figure out how to be happy themselves. Or if they're extrovert, then they figure out how to quickly make their friends and make their connections in a new place. So for me, that was a big awareness of how much that pushed my own extroversion. And for me, I'd certainly got no inkling of any of this until, I was probably 10 years into my life science, biotech, pharmaceutical career, and had realized that I wasn't on a path that was making me happy. That having, I've got a couple Ivy League degrees, and I pursued that kind of success, figuring out if I was successful in high school that I'd get into a great college. Did it. Great. looked around, realized I'd have to work harder to be successful in that new environment, in that Ivy League school. And so I worked harder and I doubled down, and I was like, kept looking for when that success was going to translate into happiness. And for me, all it did was translate into more stress, because every time I'd get some accolade, I'd be in this more elite crew, right? This more competitive crew. And then I have to work even harder. And so instead of work hard, be successful, and then successful drives happiness, what it did for me was I get work hard, be successful, and then have to work even harder in order to maintain that success. And that drove me into this negative spiral of, instead of happiness, it drove me to the therapist chair. It threw me to SSRIs, because that stress of always having to work harder and always do more turned into anxiety, and that anxiety turned into insomnia, and insomnia turned into depression. And this career that I thought was going to make me happy, it was really successful, but I never got to that happiness piece. And that's when I discovered all the great research. And it was only 10 years old. This is in 2008, 2009. The science itself was less than a decade old. But Martin Seligman was starting to publish. Barbara Fredrickson was publishing a lot of really cool research that said this stuff's really important, and we're not focusing on it. Psychology research isn't focusing on it, et cetera. And so for me, that was a wake-up call. Like, wow, there's all this cool science about happiness. So let's figure out how we can actually use that. How can we apply that, not only in our personal lives, but also at work? And then Sean came out with his book, and I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And so I reached out to him and I said, Sean, I've been trying to do this for 3 years. You now have this great TED Talk. You've got this great book. How can I help you get this message out? And that was a great leverage point to then say, because that TED Talk was amazing. And so it really kicked things off and allowed us to move forward and got the initial exposure. So yeah, so that was a big piece of sort of my history and how I got introduced to this.
That's awesome. I remember when I was working in the hospitals, with the positive outliers, it was always really awkward and kind of weird. These people that would come in going, yeah, it's Monday, I get to go to work. And I know you've spent a lot of time on that in terms of putting positivity and optimism and happiness to work. And I know you've written extensively about this, and you're a coach. So could you share some stories about how you've put happiness to work in organizations and also in your personal life?
Sure. I mean, I think so. We've hit the personal life quite a bit, but let's talk about some of the organization things. Working with Sean and with the team at ITLN and the Orange Frog has been great, because it's spent the last 10, 15 years in organizations trying things out, experimenting. And some of the things that we found that work the best, and importantly, that don't take as much time, because again, we're all really busy. We don't have time to spend hours on happiness things, is really that time at the beginning of a meeting is the most powerful time, because it sets the tone for the whole meeting. So if you can find little ways to bring people together, to bring some positive emotions into a meeting, the rest of your meeting and all the challenges that you're going to have to work through are so much. When you're primed with positive emotions, you're so much more able to see outside the box, to see solutions you wouldn't see when you're just like, oh, this sucks and I don't want this and this, and then you're never going to solve a problem. But if you're primed, even if it's not about your work, if you're primed with something positive, you're feeling connected, you're feeling engaged, you feel like what you're doing is meaningful, even if it hasn't been successful immediately, that gives you so much energy to then tackle the challenges. It gives you opportunities to see outside the immediacy of the problem and try to get creative about how to solve it. And if you have a whole team that can be doing that simultaneously, you'll be able to get to a much better place much faster. So what are some of the tools that help do it? Well, one of my favorites is, if you're a manager and you lead any people at all, most people have one-on-one meetings with their individual members of their team from time to time.
Right.
Start that meeting off with just saying, hey, what's something good you've seen one of your team members do? Simple question. And the important thing is you don't let them off the hook. Give them time. Hey, if you need a minute or two to think about it, that's fine. But I want an answer, a real answer. And then get it. Jot it down if you want. Ask them, hey, did you share how cool you thought that was with the person? Yes, no, maybe not. obviously that'll motivate them to maybe share what they saw. And what it does for you as the leader is it gives you a list. And if you do this with all 5 of your team members over the course of a week or two, and you do it every period of time, you're going to know a lot more about all the good things that are happening on your team and the things that you don't see because you can only see so much. It's probably one of my favorite, because then when you're walking around and we're talking to the team, you can be, hey, Sarah told me you did a great job on the project and that you were just bird dogging that thing because you got that problem solved. Right. So thank you from the team to do that. Yeah. That's an amazingly powerful thing that so many of the managers that I've worked with have said, yes, that works. And it gives me so much power.
I love that, Kim. I remember when I used to have one-on-ones, I was like, I get told something good and then spend the next 40 minutes, talking about everything our team had done wrong. So I think that's just a brilliant strategy. I was like, I would dread going for those one-on-one meetings.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I think that's...
Yeah. And we're talking about organizations, and I just want to bring it quickly, just real quick, back to the schools as well, because we know that one of the greatest indicators of success as a school is the culture of the building. And the first thing we have to do is get kids in the building. And if they don't have those connections with staff and staff aren't feeling those connections with kids, I mean, there's no learning that's really going to go on. So being able to bring that positive culture into every place, into the school, so kids feel connected, so kids want to be engaged, so kids want to learn. And there's so many things, like when you're saying organizations, I want to, our schools to remember that this is for them too, right?
Right. Yeah. Hey, Eric, so we just got a text in from someone asking, so this sounds great, but does it also come across as a little bit Pollyanna? Like, hey, we're doing all this happiness stuff and, this sounds a little bit fluffy, being happy at work. What do you say about that? Because I can imagine that's an issue for some people, right?
Sure. And I think there's a couple aspects of that. One is there are people that are going to be skeptical of any change, right? So making sure that you've got for yourself and for people around it that you know some of the data behind it, that we know that every bit of research says if we're filled with more positive emotions at work, real ones, authentic ones that are based on real things that you appreciate, we're not talking about faking it or pretending, right? We're talking about what are the things that really are going well and how do we focus on it? What are the things that people are doing for each other? So it's got to be authentic.
Right.
That's a big one. I think another thing is there is a space for negative emotions. It is not just about happiness. When we, as individuals and as teams, we're going to be disappointed sometimes. We're going to lose people. We're going to not get the promotion that we thought we deserved. We're going to not we're not always going to be successful. And it's important to give ourselves time. There's important information in negative emotions, all right? Especially when it's because of something that happened to us from the outside. That anger can tell us that maybe one of our values is being stepped on, or help us point to what's important about our work. When we're sad about something, that's okay. Let it in. Let it be felt. Not necessarily expressed. Like if you're feeling a lot of anger, it's not necessarily like lash out at everybody, but let it in and like figure out what's at the base of that anger, right? Because there's a lot of important information in there. So when people talk or hear about happiness training, they're like, well, that ignores all of our dark sides and our negative work, and we're supposed to push it over with this positive stuff. And I want to be clear, there are a lot of negative emotions that we need to let in.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, there's also a lot of negative emotions that we create ourselves. I didn't get that promotion. That means I suck, or I did this wrong, or they suck and they're terrible people. They didn't recognize me. Okay, now you're creating a whole lot of negativity in your own mind.
Yeah.
And that's
what I wanted to ask you. How do we stop those negative thoughts? Because so often we think that those are facts that are coming in, that our brain are telling us, I do suck. I didn't get that promotion. Okay. How can we use positive psychology to kind of stop that negative spiraling that we're doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest part is when you're feeling those negative emotions, like, what is it? Stop and ask yourself. So what's really driving this? Is it that I felt slighted? Is it that I feel that I'm not good enough? Is it like, how much of it is coming from your own head and how much of it is coming from the outside world? right?
Right.
Figuring that out. Obviously, there are outside things we can solve, but where we have the most power is in our own mind. And if we're noticing that we're continually like harassing ourselves, start to notice what you're saying. Write it down. Write down these thoughts that you have, and then look back at them later and be like, I was being so mean to myself. That's really untrue. And then bring some of the facts of your intelligence, of your participation, of your hard work to counter some of those things that your mind is saying to you, right? This is some basic sort of cognitive behavioral stuff. Notice the thoughts. And then when you notice it the next time, see if you can sub in something different. Right.
And I think for people who have that performance-based accolades, that's what that can happen really quickly and you can spiral out. So I really love that you say, start writing those thoughts down. Look at what you're saying to yourself and then bring in the facts. Is that true? No, it's not.
Right.
Really
and
good.
some of that is real, right? Like you're not going to have all the skills that you need to be successful all the time. So it's okay. Okay, what does that mean? I need to work on this skill. This is the reason. What is the reason that it wasn't successful? Because I need to work on this. Hopefully it's something that you're actually like doing and are good at. Otherwise, maybe you find someone else to do it. But like, we got to work on ourselves, but we also got to see the situations we're putting ourselves in.
Right.
And if it's not fitting
Not
our
all or
strengths,
nothing.
our power, then we should also think about maybe that's project's not for me. And I should see if I can get some teammates to help me with that. And then maybe not sign up for those kind of projects in the future.
And knowing that that's okay. That project just isn't for me. And that's
exactly.
Okay.
We don't have to be perfect. I was a perfectionist to the nth degree.
Recovering.
And a recovering perfectionist. And you got to be like, all right, what's good enough? And you can't be great at everything. So I love like Strength Finders and Clifton Strengths, figuring out what you're good at and then figuring out ways to adapt your job to do that. Same thing in terms of meaning and values. If you can find what your personal values are, see if you can get onto projects that sort of support those or overlap with those, that where you can feel your value being expressed in those things. This takes work, but that's something that's great to work on with a coach or get a couple good books and understand yourself, because then you're going to be able to find and say yes to things that fit those things that are part of you and be able to say no to things that don't matter, that don't make sense.
Yeah. So Kim, I'm a Disney guy through and through, and it's really interesting though that this last week the biggest box office hit has been Pixar's Inside Out 2.
Yep.
Last night.
Did you see it? So I mean, Eric, I haven't seen it yet, but I understand a little bit in the storyline from the first one as Riley now gets the embarrassment and the anger,
anxiety
and things like that. So it's
my favorite
issue for people around. This is around the world. It's like the #1 box office. So it's clearly an issue for people. But I'm also interested because you talk about these 2-minute interventions that we can do, these kind of happiness habits. But what's the evidence that supports that doing these things creates a more optimistic outlook and is an advantage to us?
Yeah, that there is so much research in this space now about how these small interventions and these little moments of positive emotion can counter so much of the negativity that we have, and what a lot of them drive our engagement and our colleagues' engagement. And when people are engaged, when they feel like they belong on the team, when they feel like there's meaning, when they feel like they're connected and that they are appreciated and valued, they're gonna care about the results. They're gonna move forward. And so we see when we focus on positive emotions and those types in particular, that helps people be engaged. It helps them take their own initiative. It helps them it helps them care enough to want to move forward. And the research, you can take any angle on that. Any of these exercises have all been fleshed out in a way that shows teams get better when they care about each other. Teams get better when they have something meaningful that they get to do every day. Teams get better and they have better results when they are engaging with one another in a positive way, when they've created psychological safety in the team so that people can share their ideas without being shut down. These things the research just comes in droves over and over and over. Now, it's not only about the positives, so we got to give time for the negatives and look, things are not going to work all the time. If we only focus on the knot of success and not the 80% towards the goal that we made it, then we're going to be cycling in those negative spirals, and we're not going to be able to move forward.
Right.
So
I have this big question. I always like in these podcasts, Kim, to ask a big question. So if happiness is a choice, then how do you make that choice? I mean, is it, I think I've heard you talk about neuroplasticity. I mean, can we, if we've grown
we're
up.
on the same wavelength, because that's where I was going too. It's like,
Right.
how
So
do we get there?
how do we get there? Because, can we train our brains to be more positive, even if we've had like a difficult childhood, or we've had difficult things in our life? Or, do you have to be happy all the time? And, that kind of permeates out to other people. I think it's a big question that our listeners would, enjoy hearing your views on.
Yeah. Yeah. The central piece that we talk about in Orange Frog and all the trainings that I do is we need to find ways to consistently change our perspectives and practice it and wire it, right? So this is all about habits. And so we have 5 different habits that we recommend, not 5 ones that we need to do, but 5 that people can choose from. Find one that fits for them, right? Things like getting moving and doing some kind of exercise regularly, things like meditation, things like a gratitude practice where you simply write down 3 things that you appreciate in your life. Doing a good conscious act of kindness, right? These are the kind of tools that we ask everybody, find 2 minutes each day, a little bit longer for the exercise one, but 2 minutes each day for these other exercises to scan the world for what's right, scan the world for what's good, you literally rewire neuroplasticity. We used to think that our brains sort of stopped developing at 25, but what we know now in the last 20 years has shown us our brains keep evolving and keep growing and keep changing based on where we focus our attention. So if we only focus our attention on the bad things and the problems, then all we're going to see in the world are the bad things and the problems. So we need an exercise like that gratitude, like doing nice things for people where we notice the good stuff. And the more we do it, we activate this neural pathway and it starts to grow new synapses along that pathway that makes it easier and faster. When we start to do this for a couple of weeks and maybe a month, now we're starting to rewire and grow new neurons along that pathway. Again, making it easier and faster to find the good stuff, to find the things that are positive in this world. And so you need to do these habits, short amount of time, but consistently do them in order to rewire your brain to be happier. So we can choose it. We can choose happiness in the moment, but more importantly, we can choose it every day by making sure we're doing some of these practices.
Right. Now, you've talked about meditation quite a few times during this podcast. What do you say to people like me that, I try and do it, and then I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to go over to the supermarket and do this, and I'm thinking about my to-do list. I mean, so...
Well, and even when you're in the moment, it's, okay, I'm going to try this, and then it's just like thought. How do you do it?
So there's 2 parts. First one is, there's a reason we talk about 5, because some of them are people are going to be like, oh, I tried that, I hated it.
Right.
If you don't want to try it again, and if you really hate it, fine, don't. Right. The reason we have 5 is because not all of them are going to work for everybody. And then I actually lead the sort of a meditation whenever we're doing these workshops myself. And that is norm. What Kim was talking about, thought. That is what our brain is trained to do. It is about how do its whole thing is to scan for the problems and the risks in the world. So the whole idea of meditation is, hey, let's just focus back on our breath. Thought's going to come up. That's what it's for. Even some of my teachers in meditation who've been doing this for 30 years, they're like, I sit down sometimes and I'm thinking about having to thaw out the freezer. I'm thinking about all the 10 things I have to do. And that's okay. You take what comes when you're actually meditating. Sometimes zoom, all these thoughts. But then you get better and you start noticing when you're wandering off and you just slowly bring it back. And that's the practice. You don't get better at meditating by not doing it right. or by having a perfectly focused moment. You need to have those interruptions, because then you're like, oh, I just wandered off about the freezer. Let me come right back to this central piece of my breath. And that's the training. So if it's of interest, if it's not, you're like, oh, that's hippy dippy California stuff. Fine. That you don't have to do that one. Try gratitude practice instead. Try doing nice things for people instead. Whichever one. I always want to give a lot of options because some are going to call to some people and others are going to call to their personality, to other people's personality.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have a choice, what one sounds fun for you? Start with that.
Right. And so how long do you think it takes to create these habits then? So, if I'm trying to do that, you know, I'm probably thinking I might give up after 6 days because, something else happens. But what advice do you have to people that, do you know what I mean?
The hardest part is sticking with a habit, right? You decide you're going to do it, but the brain wants to go back to the way it always did it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the deep neural pathways.
Because it's easier. Yeah.
And it was easier, right? It's easier to not do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you get to, so some research says 21 days. Some of it says it's more like 38 days. What I care about is that you get it past a couple weeks because then you're starting to form those neural pathways. And it's not, and it's, we invite everyone to do it for 21 days in the workshop. But the fact is that's just to start the habit forming in order to keep doing it. Now you don't have to do it in the same formal way, but you got to find some way to lace it into your life that you're consistently doing that you're consistently looking for what's positive. And maybe it's sitting around the dinner table with your family and, you go around the table. Hey, what's a couple good things that happened today?
Yeah.
Maybe you also let them share something hard that happened because people like to talk about that too. It's not only about creating positive conversations, but you're creating conversations. And as long as there's a partial question that you're also asking for the positive, you're going to make a difference.
Right. I don't know about you, Kim. I used to ask my kids, how was school today? And they'd go,
Nothing.
yeah, what'd you do?
Mm-hmm.
So is there like, seriously, I don't think I'm the only one, right, Kim? So
No, not at all. Not at all.
Do you have some advice? Because I think this doesn't just happen. I've seen this happen with you, Eric, is, you do these workshops with adults in the workplace, but then they take it back to their families, right? And then that just, it amplifies, right?
Totally.
So do you have any advice, for parents or for to do this with your colleagues, because you talk about the social connection? Seems like that's really important as well, not just in the workplace.
Oh, home is really important. And can I just say real quickly is, like, before I even got into all of this stuff, I went to my brother's years and years and years and years and years ago, and he was in the Navy at that time. And when the kids came home from school and they're doing dinner, and this is exactly what you were talking about, Andy, it's like at the end of dinner, it's like highs and lows for the day. And I was like not even thinking this is a hippie thing, but in my head, I got my crazy roommate going, well, this is a strange thing. And like, now I know how incredible that was for them to start that with their kids. So how can you build on that, Eric, and say, like, yeah, these little pieces maybe are something that you can do at home, to bring that into everyone, right?
Creating those, whichever ones you're excited about doing, creating that in your own life, making it consistent, doing all the things, getting a partner. Obviously if your life partner or your family or friends want to do it with you, if you have a colleague at work that wants to do something with you, the more the social support you can create for yourself and other people doing it, the more you're going to stick with it because you got someone to share and talk about it. And so when you get both a team at work and your team at home doing these things and thinking about these things and asking each other about these things, now that really reinforces and it makes it a lot easier because we're doing it as a community, as a group instead of individually.
Well,
Right.
And how cool to get your kids started on doing those positive tactics as well.
Rewire their brains early, man.
Yeah.
Everything else is pushing them to drive success, and that's going to be happiness. And it's not. And of course, this doesn't mean don't work hard at something, but just be consciously aware of working hard and being successful isn't going to drive happiness. You also need to do these things along the way to have happiness now, not in some future time.
So what are the biggest obstacles? So we talk a lot about going into organizations. So what are some of the biggest obstacles, or the biggest obstacle that an organization is going to face to cultivate more happiness and more positivity and kind of change that culture? Is it a mindset? What is it that we can bring to them to help them move forward?
Well, it's funny because everybody wants to be happy, right? It's something we talk about very early on in our lives. Like, we all want to be happy. We all want to work with happy people. And most of us know when we step back and look that our most productive times, not always feeling happy in the moment, but we're with a group of people that are happy, that we're working together to move things forward. We all know that happiness really does drive success. We just don't know how to do it. And how we do it in our busy lives is we need to find those little moments. We need to use that space at the beginning of the meeting. Use that space when you first wake up to do your happiness habit, or at the end of the day, but making sure you create and make that sacred. Because those little amounts of time built up over weeks and months and years completely change how we look at the world.
And the whole culture.
Yep. And if we're doing that collectively as a team, whether that's a 5-person team because you got your immediate group, or whether that's an entire organization, you're making it. Now, you're always going to find a few curmudgeons that think this stuff is stupid and it's a waste of time. And don't spend a lot of time trying to convert them at the beginning. Find the people that are like, that sounds kind of cool. I want to try that. Let's try that together. You don't have to have the whole team. If 3 of you decide to start doing exercise, hey, we're doing this exercise. If you guys join us when you want, please don't ever force people into these exercises. They need to choose it. Lay out the research that's written in the books and that's written in that we talk about but don't force people. Forced happiness is never going to work. It's kind of part of the toxic positivity thing. No, you got to be happy. You got to be happy. Okay.
Right.
Don't do it. So when you get those curmudgeons, those resistors, don't take them on. Let them be who they are, but then find the people that want to do it. And you're going to get enough people. Then everyone, all the in-between people, when they see the 3 of you enjoying something, they're going to want to come. And then ultimately their curmudgeons either going to self-select out because they're 100% that way, or they're going to, all right, maybe I'll try a little bit, but I want to do it my way. Right. Absolutely. Do it your way. You don't have to do it our way. That's 100%. Let people experiment and play. And then you're going to get 80%, 90% of people on board. And then 10%. Sometimes people will just roll their eyes forever.
Eric, as we come to a close of this podcast, is there any summary or anything else that you wanted to give our listeners as we close out today, so that they can start today? Because we can all start today, right?
Yeah.
It's a small
I think the number one is, no matter how negative you think that you are in your life, you can get more positive using these tools. And it's about those individual habits. And it's about those little things that we can do with a team to bond us together, to help us understand one another, and to work together. So those personal habits that we sort of alluded to, that we hinted, that we talked through a number of them, find one of those that sounds good to you and just find a way to fit it. There's lots of advice on the internet about how to do these, how to implement them. Make sure they're consistent. Try to do it at the same time every day. Try to tie it to another habit if you can. I love to do my gratitude practice while I'm brushing my teeth. I'm thinking about the things, and then my journal's right there. I write them down right after I'm done brushing my teeth. Boom. I'm spending 3 minutes doing it. So find a way to do it consistently, and then find some other people to do them with you. In terms of at work or in organizations or in groups, whatever groups you have, find ways to start, put it on the agenda that you're starting with something cool. Maybe you're sharing a funny video. Maybe you're just going around the circle sharing one thing people are grateful for. If you got a big group, have them pair off and say, hey, we're going to share one thing that we're grateful for. Talk to the person and just tell it to the person next to you, right? 2 minutes, done. And now everyone's primed with some of this positive stuff. Find those things that work for you and work for your team, and play with them for a while. After a couple months, switch them up, change them in some way so they stay fresh, or that you got a new question. That's what works. That's what we see work consistently with organizations, consistently with individuals. We got to do, that's the work, but it doesn't take a lot of time. And so even those that are the busiest can find a way to fit that in. And that's the path to success.
So what I'm hearing you say is, this external stuff around us may not change, right? So we've got all of this stuff going on. So the external world doesn't have that much to do with it. It has to start with us.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. If we aren't deciding to find the happiness within the world that we're in. And it doesn't mean that we can ignore oppression or
Right.
a really bad boss that's taking away our value all the time. Sometimes there's some macro changes we have to make, but most of us are complaining about a lot of things that if we can't change them, let's find ways to work around them or within them. And that's a key path to happiness is no matter what hand we're dealt with, we can find a way to find a little bit of things to be grateful for, find some ways of finding the positive. And it's not always easy, but we take the time to do it. That's how the positive change happens.
Eric, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today and our listeners. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed, the practical insights and the experience that you have. And we look forward to continuing working with you. Hope you'll come back for another podcast, maybe on another section.
Sure.
Soon. And I'd like to thank all the listeners, Kim, Bill, our producer. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Orange Frog Fly By Night podcast.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Bye, y'all.